Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, here with my co-host, Bethany Ruff.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to the show. And we have an awesome guest to introduce to you today. He is a two-time guest now. Daryl Bouchard is an expert on all things salt. Daryl grew up working in the family mineral business right here in Utah, in a town called Redmond. He earned his bachelor's degree in Southern Utah University and his MBA at Western Governors University. He has the gift of being able to share the story and science behind salt, why it is essential for health, and why you probably aren't getting enough. Daryl is passionate about healthy eating and healthy living. He lives with his family in Heber, Utah, loves mountain biking and water skiing, and it is an absolute pleasure to welcome him back to Boundless Body Radio. Daryl, welcome back.
Casey, Bethany, thanks for having me on the program again.
Absolutely. It's an honor to talk to you again. I have to tell you that since our conversation, I have been, really we both have been making an effort to eat even more salt than we were before. And we're happy to tell you we still are not hypertensive, so that's great. And I have a tough time finding my upper limit for salt intake. It seems like I just need more and more, and the more I have, the better I feel. Is that a story you hear quite a bit?
You know, it really is, especially for somebody who's trying to eat a very natural diet and somebody who's very active. Because if you're not eating a lot of processed foods and you are active and you're sweating, you're doing workouts, our bodies are burning a lot of salt. You know, our tears are salt, our sweat's salt, our urine's salt. So if you're healthy and you're eating healthy and exercising, your salt levels generally are a lot higher than, or need to be a lot higher than you may have thought otherwise.
Yeah, it's like grams. I mean, you guys make, our favorite salt, Redmond Real Salt, and you make it in a 6 gram vial, which I really love. I love to take it with me whenever I, go out or whatever, whenever I'm exercising. It's nice just to have with me. And I will literally shoot like 2 or 3 grams out of that thing, a few times a day. And it just feels better and better the more I do it. It's crazy. I thought I was doing really well with my salt intake, but I still must have been way less than what I actually needed. Really crazy. So you guys, obviously as a salt mineral company are pretty well versed in making your salt products, but I decided to invite you to the show today to bring you back and talk to you about some of the products you guys offer on the dental side of things, because I wouldn't think a company like you would get involved in something like that. And you make some pretty cool products that I'm really curious to talk to you about today.
Well, I would love to. Growing up, I don't know if it was that my dad was cheap or he was a genius, but we just used a tooth powder that we made with bentonite clay, which is a natural mineral clay there on the property, and a mix of salt. And salt's been used, since the dawn of time for tooth powders and for oral health. So that's what we did growing up. Of course, that doesn't taste near as good. And so we took that as the basic formula and then created a dental line with it.
Wow. Yeah, that's super interesting. Before we deep dive into that, I would like to know a little bit about why we have so many dental issues as is. I mean, I remember growing up and having lots of cavities. I remember they sealed some of my molars. I remember as a precaution, they took out 4 of my wisdom teeth. It just seems so strange. And we've talked to some of our past guests about this. And so I'd love to know a little bit about the importance of dental health and why we're in such a weird place with it right now.
Dental health is kind of interesting because if we look today, you're absolutely right. There's a plethora of dental problems, from the size of people's mouth, and so we're getting teeth extracted, to gum disease, receding bone and receding gum, cavities, all kinds of things. But yet, if we go back even to like ancient Egypt and look at some of the mummies, we've got people, mummies with beautiful teeth, strong teeth, healthy teeth. This was long before we had a lot of dental care that we know today, long before they were putting fluoride and things like that into the water supply. And yet people still had great teeth. And so there's certainly things that have changed over time. And then, diet is one of those that's probably the biggest contributor, as well as the amount of sugar and things that we're consuming now that people haven't always consumed.
Yeah, we talked to James Nestor. He wrote the book Breath, and he describes learning about some of these things. He studied the work of Weston A. Price, who was a dentist who traveled around the world to try to figure out some of this stuff, decades ago. And as James Nestor was doing research, he was led to some of the quarries that are buried beneath Paris, where they buried people for thousands of years. And he got to descend into, some of these quarries that aren't often visited, and which was not necessarily legal, but he got to see all these different skulls. And he said it was striking, as you kind of descended down and saw different centuries and different millennia where these people were from, how different their skulls were. Just so different how we've evolved.
That's actually what Weston A. Price noticed in his studies as well. And he studied cultures all across the globe. And he noticed that as these cultures would adopt more of a Western diet, that actually the mouth structure started to change and the tooth health started to change. They would look at these ancient or native or I'm not sure the right term, but these cultures who were living on their natural diets. And then once they switched to processed flour, refined sugars, and got away from that natural diet that was often either rich in organ meat or rich in seafood, but predominantly, those that focus on organ meat, those that focus on bugs and grubs, or those that focused on natural raw whole milk, that when they were in those original or native diets, not only were the teeth healthier, but the jaw structure actually started to change over several generations as well. Is that what you remember?
Yeah, absolutely. And the pictures that he took, he did such a great job documenting everything. The pictures that he took of these indigenous people were, their mouths were wide and they had big smiles and big white teeth. Their noses were shaped totally different. And you compare that with kids of a similar time that were here in America, and it's totally different. They were missing teeth and faces were a lot smaller and crooked. And you could see there were so many more problems. So interesting.
Fascinating area of research that I'm sure we'll still learn more about as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that now, if you look back on how that study was done, I don't think now you can do that same study because you don't have a control group. Like, this food has gone everywhere, and so there's not very many like indigenous tribes that are eating a native diet. So it would be hard to even replicate the same study. It's crazy. So we talked a little bit about like teeth and cavities, but what about like bad breath and, halitosis, I think they call it, like some of those other issues that come along in the mouth when we're not living the lifestyle that we need to live?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if we back up a little bit and look at the structure of the tooth, so the tooth is made up of the outside layer, which is enamel, and people have heard that. Underneath enamel, we have dentine. Underneath the dentine, we have pulp and then nerve and then the bone. And so in the mouth, it is a warm, moist environment, and it's got all kinds of bacteria in the mouth. And not all these bacteria are bad, but depending on what we're eating, this flora or this micro universe in our mouth can go awry. And one of the main bacteria in the mouth they're called Staphylococcus mutans. And these little Staphylococcus mutants, their job is to digest carbs and sugar. So, and when they do, they actually excrete lactic acid, which is acidic. So this enamel layer that all of our teeth have, that enamel layer can withstand acid up to about 5.5. So remember, pH is the potential of hydrogen, or how acidic or how alkaline something is. 0 is super acidic. 14 is super alkaline or basic, and 7 is neutral. So at 5.5, the enamel actually starts to dissolve. So I remember as a kid growing up, my mom used to say, "Don't eat all that sugar. Your teeth are gonna dissolve in your head if you eat all that sugar." Well, sugar actually doesn't harm enamel. You could take your teeth out. Well, hopefully you can't. But if you put teeth in a glass of sugar water, your teeth would be fine. The problem is the bacteria, these little bacteria in the mouth that digest the sugar and then they excrete lactic acid. And so when you eat something, our mouths become acidic. If you eat something that has carbs, it could be a glass of milk, has sugar in it. It could be candy. It could be whatever. It could be a piece of bread. And all of those have carbs that are digested by the Staphylococcus mutans that then excrete lactic acid. So if your mouth is at 7, which is a good natural neutral pH for your mouth, you eat something and then immediately or shortly thereafter, your pH of your mouth will drop. Once that level goes below 5.5, your teeth will start to dissolve. And we call this demineralization because it's actually pulling the minerals out of your enamel. And then after about 30 minutes, provided you're not eating anything else, the body brings the pH back up, and now your teeth start to remineralize from the saliva, from the minerals that are in the saliva. So every day our teeth go through this cycle of building enamel and losing enamel. And in nature, when we look at how people used to eat, they weren't eating every single minute of the day. And so you had this period where your teeth could, go through this mineralization, demineralization process, and people weren't eating as much sugar. And so now that we're eating, tons of sugar and we're, eating food all day long, our teeth today are bathed in acid most of the day. And then you make it worse by drinking something that's sugary and acidic, sipping on it all day long, that, soda, for instance. And it's no wonder that, so many people have teeth problems when we're treating our teeth, we're just bathing them in acid all day.
That's so interesting. How does the water that we drink play into that? Because I know when you go to the dentist, typically there's this big like fluoride treatment, and I know most conventional tap water, at least in suburban areas, has quite a bit of fluoride in it. Do you know anything about that or how that affects our teeth?
Yeah, fluoride is I think every discussion on teeth has to include a discussion on fluoride because everybody kind of associates the two. Now, what's interesting, if we go back, Bethany, to these native cultures that we just talked about, or the catacombs in Europe that have these, skulls with beautiful teeth, these teeth this was long before we had fluoride in our water. And so we don't have to have, same thing in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, we didn't have fluorinated water systems, but yet we still have great teeth. And so you can have great teeth without fluoride. In fact, if you go back to dental school and ask people what enamel is made of, the answer is never fluoride. The answer is always calcium phosphate, because that's the primary building block of enamel in nature. And as I mentioned before, when your teeth are naturally formed with this calcium phosphate, your enamel can withstand acid of about 5.5. And in nature, that's always been enough because of, we would eat, something normal that's not heavily sugared, and we're not eating it all day long. And so our teeth can naturally go through this mineral demineralization process. However, fluoride can also fit into the enamel box. So I was talking to a dentist once and asked him to explain this, and he used the analogy of our enamel is essentially a bunch of cardboard boxes. And if you have a cardboard box that's empty, you can smash it pretty good with your hand. If that cardboard box is full, you can't smash it. Now, once enamel is gone, it's gone. You can't rebuild, you can't recreate enamel, but we can remineralize with the enamel that's there. So when you have this box that we call enamel across our teeth, these cardboard boxes, in effect, are filled with calcium phosphate. And when we have, either drink something acidic, suck on a lemon, or have these Staphylococcus mutans that, excrete lactic acid and then are bathing our teeth in acid, that acid pulls the calcium phosphate out of that box. Now, when we're done eating or we bring the pH back up, then the saliva has minerals in it from our remnants of our food and the minerals in the water. And our saliva will then remineralize our teeth, and that box will get full again with that calcium phosphate or the minerals that are in our teeth. That box will also hold fluoride, and fluoride is actually a little stronger. So if your box has calcium phosphate in it, it likely will withstand acid to about 5.5. If that box has fluoride in it, it actually can even withstand a little more acid down to like 5.2. And so the enamel is a little stronger if there's fluoride in that box versus calcium phosphate, which is what our bodies have always put in that box. So for somebody who has a terrible diet and has weak enamel, there is an argument to be made for supplemental fluoride in a short period, because I'd rather have a little fluoride and keep my teeth than not have any at all. But long term, I think there's better solutions and a more natural solution, like the teeth that Dr. Weston A. Price and others have studied. Does that kind of make sense?
That's such a good visual. Thank you so much for explaining that. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you're saying, remineralization, so immediately my thought is going back to salts and how important salt is for dental health. And to kind of go on Bethany's question also, I think the water that we were drinking is so vastly different than the water we drink now, where the water we were drinking was generally spring water. And so this is water that's been held in aquifers and is channeling through rocks and picking up rocks and minerals for thousands and millions of years before it comes out of the earth. That would be a totally different substance of what a lot of people think of drinking water as.
Yeah, you're right. And unfortunately, and we talked a little bit about this in our salt episode, we humans haven't been the best stewards of our oceans or our natural springs. And because of that, with chemical runoff, with, things like people flushing pharmaceuticals down the drain, with microbeads and plastics, our water supplies have issues. And so because of that, we've gone to reverse osmosis and things like that to get rid of the stuff that we humans have put into water. Well, the challenge with something like that is it does get rid of the pharmaceuticals, it does get rid of these other chemicals, but it also gets rid of the natural minerals that our bodies have always been exposed to through that water. And so salt and mineral salt is a great way to help put those minerals back. One of the interesting things with enamel, if anybody's had their teeth whitened, what that does, it's actually kind of thinning out that top layer of enamel, which is why your teeth are a little sensitive. You don't have any nerve endings in your enamel. The nerve endings are below the dentine. But when we go and have our teeth whitened and we're kind of dissolving that outside edge, what that does is it then allows heat and cold to transfer through the dentine or through the enamel to the dentine. But after a couple of days, your teeth do remineralize. And that's why after a teeth cleaning or a teeth whitening, your teeth might be sore for a couple of days, but then that goes away as your teeth remineralize from the saliva and because of the minerals in the saliva.
And if I understand you properly, what you said earlier, you can't necessarily rebuild that enamel that was damaged during the whitening process.
Yes, so with enamel, you can't recreate enamel, but enamel does remineralize. And so there's a little bit of a fine line there. So once the enamel's gone, it's gone. However, our teeth will remineralize with the saliva in the mouth. So if you look at a product, even like Pronamel, Pronamel is a product, it's a toothpaste that's sold to help remineralize the teeth. And if you look at the active ingredient in Pronamel, it's actually calcium phosphate, which is, again, what our teeth are made of. And so what that does is you're brushing with calcium phosphate, it leaves that calcium phosphate in the saliva. And so when you're done, you spit out the foam or whatever, and then you're left with this mineral-rich saliva that can help the teeth then absorb that calcium phosphate back into the enamel and therefore remineralize the teeth. You can't rebuild enamel. You can't recreate enamel. Once it's gone, but you can remineralize the enamel that's there through this remineralizing process.
Wow, that is so mind-blowing.
We're going to lose another show sponsor here, but potential show sponsor. But I remember those Crest white strips.
Oh, they hurt so bad.
They hurt so bad to keep on for 20 minutes. And then at least for the next day or two, my teeth felt soft. I don't know how else to say it. They felt
spongy.
Yes. So what you're saying about the whitening stuff, that makes so much sense. You're actually like getting rid of enamel.
Yeah, you're kind of thinning that stained outside layer. What's interesting with teeth, so enamel is clear and the dentine is kind of a bluish color typically. And so if you went back and watched a TV show from the 70s or 60s or 50s, you'll notice that people's teeth aren't like white, like my white t-shirt. They have a white color. They might be off-white, and as people age, that dentine starts to change. But this idea that our teeth should look, stark white, like it was, like a bleached piece of paper, that's kind of a new thing. Now, when we do eat, especially if we have coffee, tea, wine, those things, they do tend to stain our teeth. And so now we can kind of talk a little bit about why we have dental products, kind of how, early ancestors cleaned their teeth, how we do it today, and how that can help with removing surface stains, and then also with how it's different when we talk about bleaching versus cleaning, because those are two subtly different things.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually where we wanted to go next. That's perfect. Is what did either indigenous tribes do that we've learned about, or what have we done in the past? I mean, I read yesterday that the like Roman and Greek cultures would sometimes use like charcoal or maybe ash and like ground up bones, or sometimes like oyster shells. And I didn't know any of that. And I don't know how they even applied it. Like, let's talk a little bit about the history of some dental care.
Yeah, so if we go back and look at some of these ancient cultures, just like today, you imagine you're eating foods, your breath may stink, right? Because it may smell like the onion you just ate or the fish you just had, and that isn't always ideal. And then you also get this buildup on our teeth. If you've ever been camping for a few days and forgot your toothbrush, you'll notice your teeth start to feel kind of slimy. And so these bacteria in the mouth, these Staphylococcus mutans, they form what we call a biofilm. And so the bacteria will bind to the tooth and kind of set up a little shop or a little colony. And the longer they're there, they invite their friends to move in. And pretty soon you've got a real slimy film on your teeth. And people have known that, how far, if we went to Rome or even earlier. And so some of the early ways people would clean teeth is actually with a stick. And so they would use a stick and scrape off this biofilm that's kind of building up on their teeth. If your stick is too hard, you've actually potentially damaged the enamel. And we can talk about that here in a second as well. And then you also have people making a paste early on, like you mentioned, with charcoal, with salt, with ground up bone, with ash. And they found that if there was a mild abrasion, they could kind of scrape and brush that tooth with that mild abrasive product and help their teeth feel clean again. And then, by rinsing, you can also, put a essential oil or chew on some mint, and then you can kind of get rid of that garlic or fish or whatever it is that you just finished eating. So, yeah, dental products have been used early on in man's history.
And so those are the more kind of natural, normal human things that we evolved. But how did the dental industry start to take that and kind of leverage that into some of the products that you can find at a general store today?
So tooth powders, although you don't see a lot of them here in the U.S. today, tooth powders were initially how the product started. One, because you don't need a preservative, there's no water in it, and so it lasts a lot longer. So you could bring this little tin with you, and you've always got this little tin that has a powder in it that then you can brush across your teeth. And it wasn't until much later that we got into toothpaste for convenience, and then this idea of putting foam in it. I think is just silly now. Most of us kind of associate, a foamy, frothy mouth with toothpaste, but it doesn't have to be that way. Foam doesn't clean your teeth. There's a lot of good things that do clean your teeth, but foam doesn't clean your teeth.
That seems like it was more of similar to how like shampoo or something would lather hand soap. It's like it feels like it's getting cleaner because it's reacting in a certain way as you're using it. Is that right?
Yeah, and it also, I think it links an experience. You can, like you said, you kind of see it working, you think you feel it, versus, brushing with a tooth powder that doesn't have a foaming agent. You look and you think you might be brushing with nothing. However, just because it's not foaming doesn't mean you don't have a lot of great things going on.
I personally, speaking from experience, can say one brush of using the tooth powder, immensely cleaner feeling than I ever got after multiple brushes and using fluoride rinse. So it's an amazing product.
Yeah, when you look at as you're looking at a great toothpaste or we call it dentifrice or a good tooth cleaning product, you really just need something that does about 5 things. First, you want something that has a polishing or cleansing compound. And so if you look at a commercial toothpaste today, that might be hydrated silica, which is basically a really fine sand, which makes sense. One option, if you go back to using the stick to scrape your teeth, or you can use a super fine grit sandpaper. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can, kind of rub that across your teeth, and that helps. That mechanical action with the toothbrush then starts to break down these biofilms, these little colonies that have built up on your teeth, which if they're there very long, they become plaque. And if that plaque stays very long, it becomes tartar. Now, the reason that becomes a problem, this colony are these little bacteria that are excreting lactic acid. And so what usually will then happen if you have this bacteria colony on your teeth that is excreting lactic acid, now you've got this little acid drop in effect every single day in the exact same spot. And that acid continues to burrow a hole deeper and deeper and deeper through the dentine or through the enamel. And now you're into the dentine, and this acid just keeps boring deeper and deeper into the hole. It creates a cavity. And so by keeping these biofilms from creating plaque and keeping these colonies of bacteria from setting up shop on your teeth, you can, in effect, help stop this acid erosion that takes place. And within the teeth, our teeth are close together, and we've got, the teeth and the gums nest together. And so if these little bacteria colonies set up in an area where we aren't brushing very well, maybe it's behind our teeth or between our teeth, these little colonies will start to build up. When they build up, they just put that acid in the same spot every day. And then we end up with a cavity. And so having a product that has a good polisher or cleanser to it, that's not overly abrasive, we can talk about that in a second, but a polishing compound is the basis for any tooth product, whether it's a toothpaste, a tooth powder, or you go into the dentist and they'll use it's called Prophy paste, which is a little more abrasive product that the hygienist will then use to polish and buff off and break down that plaque, break down the tartar, get rid of those biofilms, so your teeth are then clean. And because that surface stain on your teeth, through that polishing, whether it's in your own house with your toothbrush or the Prophy compound at the dentist, they can polish off and remove those surface stains and bring back the natural color in your teeth. Now, it's not going to be, like my white t-shirt, because your natural teeth aren't, extremely bleached white. But it will bring back the natural color of the teeth, which is more of a white off-white color.
Wow. Well, okay. So we mentioned some of those polishing agents. Bethany has mentioned the tooth powder. We bought some of your product and tried it, but Bethany tried it first. I have to give her credit for trying it. Usually she's the one that goes first on stuff like that. And anyway, I ended up getting my own and I tried it, and I can't believe how life-changing it was. I mean, we love the Redmond Earth paste, which is more like a toothpaste, which is great, but the Earth powder is totally life-changing, and polish is the best word I can use to describe it. It feels like I just got my tooth cleaning like you described at a dentist, but it doesn't have like the waxy feeling also. It just feels like my mouth is so clean and fresh, and my teeth feel really strong and firm and very much polished. That's super interesting.
Well, and one of the reasons why that feels so much different is if you used our Earth paste, the ingredients are essentially the same. But one of the base ingredients is clay. And clay is a great polisher. It also has a high pH, and so it boosts the alkalinity back up. So the toothpaste has a pH of around 8 or 9. And so if your mouth's acidic because you just drank some orange juice, or you just had a coffee, or you've had some bacteria in your mouth and it's lactic acid, by brushing with clay, either in the toothpaste or the powder, that pH then boosts the mouth's pH back up, so you're not sitting in that acid bath. But with tooth powder, it's quite interesting because in the paste, that clay is already prehydrated, so it's a very creamy feel. Clay loves to absorb water and fluid. So when you brush with tooth powder and you have very little water that you've added, that feels it's a little more abrasive because you don't have that gel already. It takes a minute for that clay to act with the moisture in your mouth and create that gel. So it's a little more abrasive just for the first few brushes. But then as that clay is absorbing fluid, it's picking up bits and pieces of saliva and maybe leftover breakfast into that clay particle because it's binding and sucking into it. That clay just loves to absorb. So then when you rinse or spit that out, that clay has really done a deep clean because it's sucking that moisture into itself as you are brushing. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's awesome. I based on what I feel when I brush my teeth, especially with the activated charcoal tooth powder, is there a need to floss? I feel like even in between my teeth and my gums feel better after that. And I have to say, most times that I floss, it's pretty painful afterwards.
I am not a dentist, and so I'm sure that there's plenty of dentists that would disagree with me. I've been very fortunate. I've got very healthy teeth. I always have. Of course, I've been brushing with clay and salt since I was young. In my late teens and early 20s, I used more of a conventional product. And then once we launched Earth Paste, I've been using that ever since. And I've been blessed with very good, strong, healthy teeth, and don't have cavities, and I've just been very fortunate that way. And my teeth are very close together, and I do not floss unless I get a piece of corn kernel or popcorn or something stuck in my teeth. I don't floss, and I'm not saying that should be recommended for everybody, but I have found with toothpaste, with the earth paste and the earth powder, and then I'll do some oil pulling occasionally if I get something that's stuck in between my teeth that I can't feel like I can quite get it out. But personally, I don't do much flossing. But I'm not saying that's the right answer for everybody.
That's very well answered. I'm glad Bethany asked about the activated charcoal. I really don't know much about it, although I see it on, different things here and there. Can you tell us a little about what that is and why you guys decided to include it in some of your products?
Yeah, so we have some of our toothpaste and our tooth powders with and without activated charcoal. The level of charcoal in the product is actually quite small. It's less than 2%. So it's even though the product is quite black, there's very little there. Now, if you look at, when we look at in dental products, they're usually rated on two scales. One of those is the pectile cleaning ratio, and the other is the RDA, or relative dentine abrasion. And so you want a product that is somewhat abrasive, but also has a good pectile cleaning ratio, PCR. So if you have a product that has a really high RDA, relative dentine abrasion, if it's over 250, then it's too abrasive for daily use. Now, they might use that in the dentist's office for an occasional cleaning with those prophy compounds. They might have an RDA of 250 even, but for daily toothpaste, that's too abrasive. And if you have like a whitening toothpaste, like maybe one of the brands that you mentioned, and it's their tartar control whitening toothpaste, that might have an RDA of 180 or even 150 or higher, somewhere in that range, that relative dentine abrasion. Because if you are buying a product for tartar control, you're buying a product to help break down that buildup that's on your teeth. And so a more abrasive product will do that. Compare that to like a sensitive toothpaste, like a Sensodyne or something, that's going to have a very low RDA, very, very little abrasion. And so there are people that have stronger or weaker or maybe more sensitive or less sensitive teeth. And so a one size fits all, I'm not suggesting is the best route. But what you're looking for is a product that has a great pectile cleaning ratio and a RDA that's not too high. And so when it comes to activated charcoal products, if you looked at a conventional product with and without charcoal, charcoal is a great polisher. And so and it has a relatively low relative dentine abrasion. And so compared to something maybe like hydrated silica, the charcoal is less abrasive, but seems to have a better polishing effect. And so that's why there's so many products now that have charcoal in it. Now, if you look at ours side by side and we do a test of the pectile cleaning ratio, what they do there is they take basically two teeth and put them in a little tray, and then they'll scrape the teeth, so many times with the product sitting on it, and then they look at those two teeth and see how clean they are. That's how they test the pectile cleaning ratio. If you look at our products that have charcoal and not charcoal in them, the pectile cleaning ratio is almost the same. And so as far as actually the polishing of the teeth, it doesn't seem like the charcoal, at least in the studies, has a higher polishing effect than it does without charcoal. That said, with charcoal, there are some that seem, and maybe Bethany, you're one of those, when they use charcoal, their teeth feel and their teeth appear whiter. So there may be some other mechanism of action that we're not testing that actually is lending the charcoal to a whitening effect. And some would say that. I just hate to say that the charcoal whitens better, because in the studies, I don't see that in the pectile cleaning ratio, even though anecdotally, a lot of people feel that it does. And so that's kind of the difference here when we talk about whitening teeth through a chemical action, or whitening teeth by removing surface stains. And so if you have a product that has a whitening effect because we're removing the coffee, the tea, and just daily, stains on our teeth, that is whitening the teeth, but it's not bleaching the teeth like a peroxide action. And so there may be something that we learn down the road that shows that activated charcoal has some type of a bleaching peroxide oxygen exchange effect that we don't see when we're just doing the mechanical brushing test. That might be a little bit in the weeds, but hopefully that kind of helps you see the difference in the charcoal, the activated charcoal, the clay, and maybe a conventional toothpaste.
I just think it's so cool. It's the effect that I feel with it is, again, not that it's doing any type of artificial whitening by any means, but it's almost like pulling something out a little bit stronger than just the other tooth powder. And my only other experience with activated charcoal is with the worst stomach upsets that I've ever had in my life. Taking activated charcoal pills tends to pull, I don't know if it's the stomach acid, or it helps to rebalance the natural pH of the stomach also. So I wonder, and that's also for poison control. I know that's recommended if you somehow consume some poison of some type, taking an activated charcoal pill can kind of pull that out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the reason for that is something called surface area to surface tension ratio. And so if you look at activated charcoal under a microscope, it has the ability, it's almost like a sponge, and it actually draws and pulls stuff into it. And the mechanism of action of clay is actually quite similar. And so today, EMTs, I ran with EMTs for a while, and one of the things you do for a drug overdose is administering activated charcoal, because that charcoal draws and binds stuff into it. And clay works very similarly to that.
Hmm. Okay, so I was wondering this, based on the activated charcoal itself, can you use it too much? Like, is it safe to be your primary, toothpaste, essentially tooth powder, and use multiple times a day?
Yes. The short answer is yes, but there's an asterisk by it. And so, as I mentioned before, there are some really good studies. These are double-blind medical studies that show that a tooth powder is actually better for plaque and for tartar than a toothpaste, because it is slightly more abrasive. Because as you put that powder in your mouth, it's dry, and if you were to use wet sandpaper versus dry sandpaper, the dry sandpaper is going to be more abrasive. And so there are times, and there are people, if somebody's got really soft or weak or thinned enamel, that brushing with a tooth powder 3 times a day that is maybe slightly more abrasive than some other dental product, it may be too abrasive for that person. And so if somebody's using a tooth powder, whatever the brand is, and they notice their teeth are getting a little sensitive, they might want to swap that out and do a tooth powder less frequently, because it is a little more abrasive. And then for some people, it may be too abrasive for any use, and they may be better off with a much milder, or even making their own dental product that could essentially be a mechanical toothbrush, or I say mechanical, that means using your own hand, or whether it's by a hand, or by one of the motorized or mechanized. But a mechanical action is the mechanism of brushing the teeth, and you could make your own oral product with something that's much less abrasive if you were one of those individuals who have a very, very sensitive or thinned out enamel.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure you have heard this story a million times by now, but it is quite the different experience. If you were, kind of like me, used to, the bleach white toothpaste with the foaming ingredients that you and I were talking about, and you brush your teeth for the first time using earth powder, and there was a pretty good sized black mess all over my sink and cupboard. I'm sure that's a story you've heard more than once.
It is, for 2 reasons. So when somebody switches to a natural toothpaste, you look at the label on a lot of toothpaste, and they have things like titanium dioxide, which is basically it's a chemical or a mineral they'll add to paint or add to lotions and creams to make them look white. It does not do a thing for your teeth. There's no reason to put titanium dioxide in toothpaste to make the toothpaste look white, other than the fact that if we want white teeth, we assume that if we brush with something white, we'll get white teeth. Another ingredient that's often in commercial toothpaste is sodium lauryl sulfate. You'll hear it called SLS, or different foaming agents they will add. One of the downsides of that foaming agent is, for some people, and actually quite a lot of people actually, it gives them canker sores or mouth sores. And so if somebody is saying, I've used toothpaste, I was getting these canker sores, it could be that they're one of the people that are sensitive to SLS. And if you are, it actually causes irritation and micro breaks in the membranes of the mouth, which become quite irritated. And so if you're one of those people switching to a natural toothpaste, like earth paste, that doesn't have the titanium dioxide added to make it look white, doesn't have the foaming agents to make it look like you've got rabies. When you switch over the first time, it feels like you're doing nothing. And you brush with the tooth powder initially as you get your toothbrush wet, dip it in the tooth powder and start brushing. Your first thought might be, man, this is doing, I feel nothing. I don't have a mouthful of foam. I don't feel anything. But then when you spit and rinse, then they're like, oh my word, my teeth feel like I just left the dentist's office. They realize that foam doesn't mean clean. They realize that a white toothpaste doesn't mean it's going to make your teeth white, and that you can get this, really clean, fresh, and natural dental product without some of that other, artificial colors and flavors and preservatives and SLS and titanium dioxide that are in a lot of tooth products today.
Mm. So besides the abrasion that you were talking about earlier, if somebody wants to check out a more natural toothpaste or tooth powder, is there anything else they need to be thinking about when considering whether they're going to be using earth paste or earth powder or any other brand of toothpaste or tooth powder?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And the things that you want to look for is that does it have a polisher or cleanser? In the case of earth paste, that's the clay. Clay's a real mild polisher. The next thing is a pH booster. You'll notice a lot of products today have made with baking soda, a lot of toothpaste products. Well, baking soda is alkaline. And so again, the reason that you would have a toothpaste with baking soda in it isn't because baking soda cleans your teeth. It's that baking soda boosts the alkalinity so you're not bathing your teeth in acid. And so that's why you have toothpaste that have baking soda in it. In earth paste, the clay itself has a pH of about 8.7 to 9.8. And so we don't add baking soda to it because the clay itself gives us that very alkaline base. So you can enjoy your cup of coffee. Coffee's acidic, and now you're going to brush your teeth with earth paste or even the earth powder, and then boom, instead of having your teeth sit there in that acidic saliva for an hour or however long you're working on your coffee, and then when you're done, the mouth will naturally bring itself back up to 7. But by brushing with an alkaline product, then you can get there a lot faster. And then the freshened breath, we're all around people every day, and maybe it's our spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend, or it could just be in the office. Nobody wants stinky breath. And so by getting rid of those biofilms and getting rid of the food that's stuck between our teeth that's kind of naturally sitting there rotting, and then by adding something to give us that fresh breath that we like, whether it's a little bit of peppermint, a little bit of spearmint, a little bit of a citrus, lemon flavor, cinnamon, what that does, it just kind of resets the mouth to give us that fresh feeling that we like, the kissable fresh breath, as it were. And so that's really what you're looking for. It's something, a great polisher. It's got a pH boost in it. It's got something to freshen the breath. And then the other thing that is often added is something to deal with the microbes. And so in some products, it might be an antimicrobial that will add to that toothpaste. In earth paste, we have two different versions of our products. One of those we call unsweetened, and one of those is sweetened. Now, remember that I told you these bacteria in the mouth, they like to eat refined carbs and they like to eat sugars, but they only like to eat 6 carbon sugars. And so if you look at a carbon molecule, it's got 6 carbons on it. And these bacteria eat this 6 carbon sugar. Well, if you go to a sugar alcohol, like xylitol, for instance, xylitol is something that you create in your body. Your body creates a little bit of it every day, but it also occurs in plants. And xylitol is a 5 carbon sugar. And so these little microbes in the mouth, they see this xylitol and they think, oh, this is sugar. And they try to eat it, but then they end up starving to death and they can't excrete lactic acid. And so the reason you have toothpaste with xylitol added is because xylitol is a 5 carbon sugar that it is produced, but it does occur in nature. And the bacteria in the mouth mistakenly look at it as a sugar they can eat and create acid. And so some of our products have a little bit of xylitol in them. It's about 15%, which is what the American Dental Association and the American Hygienist Association say is the amount of xylitol that will work against the bacteria and the acid process in your mouth. And a little bit of xylitol also creates a layer that makes it very hard for the bacteria to adhere to the teeth. And so for those that are open to xylitol, we have some of our earth paste and our earth powders that have a little bit of xylitol in it. Again, it's there as to work against the bacteria in the mouth. But if for whatever reason somebody's concerned with xylitol, we also have some that are unsweetened without xylitol in it. And if you go with the xylitol version, you can rest assured that it is non-GMO xylitol. And so hopefully that kind of answers that xylitol and the microbial question.
Yeah, before we move on from that, what are your thoughts as far as, let's say I just finished a meal and it's not super conducive for me to go and brush my teeth with some earth powder? Is chewing gum with xylitol, is that a good thing to be doing post-meal opposed to letting your teeth have to just naturally rebalance the pH?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of studies that would suggest that. There's a lot of xylitol studies that they have done, and that 15% xylitol does seem to work against the bacteria in the mouth. If the gum that you're using also has regular sugars in it or artificial of anything, then I think there'd be a better option. I've actually got one of our little travel-sized toothpaste with me. And of course, with COVID, we're not doing a lot of sales calls or trade show meetings. But at trade shows, I'll actually have a little bit of that, one of our little travel-sized toothpaste with me. And when my mouth starts to feel like a little sticky because maybe you get that trade show breath where you've just been talking all day long, I'll actually just take that little toothpaste tube, just like I would my mini salt shaker, and take a little bit of salt. I'll take that little toothpaste tube and just eat a pea-sized amount. Just put a pea-sized amount in my mouth, swash it around, use my tongue to wipe it across my teeth, rinse it. And then I'll just swallow it because I'm not using it to brush. I'm just using it as a breath freshener. And I think it works great that way. And, boost the alkalinity back up because there's just a little bit of essential oil in there, a little bit of salt in there. It's an alternative to gum. I'm not saying we won't ever introduce our own gum down the road. We don't have any in the works, but yeah, I think xylitol gum has a place.
I love it. I'll be your first customer.
Well, we love earth paste and earth powder. We have no affiliation with you guys, but it's just something we love and we love to promote because of that. Is there anything else we need to know about your dental products?
Yeah, two things. We actually have a couple of changes we're working on coming down the pipeline. We're actually introducing a little bit of Nano Silver into our oral care line. There's a lot of good research that shows that small amounts of Nano Silver are great for oral health. Because it kind of, like with the xylitol, kind of works against some of these microbes. Now, this is not like an amount that's going to turn you blue. This is just a very, very small amount that does have some oral benefits for this little Nano Silver. So that's something we're working on. And then also on our dental products, I'm not sure if you noticed, but we do have a statement that says if you're from California, this product has a California Prop 65 warning on it. What that is, in the state of California, they had some really good legislation years ago called the California Water and Clean Air Act. And it was to help companies, one, clean up some of the crap that they were, putting out, and then two, to help inform California consumers. Unfortunately, although that was a really good piece of legislation, it has created some problems. And so now you walk into Disneyland and there's a warning on Disneyland that says, warning, Disneyland contains chemicals known to the state of California to cause, birth defects and cancer and all kinds of things. And so because of that, many products in California do require a warning on it. And in the case of clay's a natural product that's from the earth and has trace amounts of heavy metals in it. Now, that clay is all bound to the heavy metals, and actually clay is used industrially and in medicine as a toxin and chemical binder. And so just because there are trace amounts of these heavy metals in the clay, it's small amounts, we put that warning on it in the state of California, but it does cause some people some questions. And there's a good website on our website that kind of addresses what that is and why that's on there.
Super interesting. So before we let you go, we also have to ask about the toothbrush itself. I mean, it seems like every single week Bethany gets a delivery of like an 8-pack of toothbrushes. She replaces them pretty much every other time she brushes. I keep mine for probably years and years and years until it's probably just a little nub, or until I can like use it to, clean up my mountain bike chain or something. Is there any kind of a thing we should be looking for as far as the brush itself goes? I know you mentioned, anything mechanical being helpful, and also like electric toothbrushes. Is there anything specifically we should be looking for there?
I had to laugh because I think you and Bethany are a lot like my wife and I. My toothbrush gets changed a lot less often than hers does. So if you look at a toothbrush, you have different heads, and sometimes you'll see like a soft, a medium, a hard, and those are the stiffness of the bristles. And for some people, we mentioned that their teeth might be a little stronger, or their gums might be a little more healthy. And so for some, a medium or a hard toothbrush may be fine. Similarly, a guy like you, Casey, who never changes his toothbrush head, the efficacy of that brush does start to go down. And as you're brushing, if you're starting to get bits and pieces of bristle, I'd say it's probably time to listen to Bethany and replace your toothbrush head. But generally speaking, today dentists, most dentists will say a soft toothbrush is a much better approach. And then brushing with a nice clean product and using a clean toothbrush that isn't falling apart. So, and I would echo that. I think generally speaking, a soft toothbrush that's replaced fairly regularly. I don't know about daily, but I think at least every 3 months, you ought to be, certainly not daily, but certainly more frequently than once every 3 years that you ought to be replacing your toothbrush head.
Well, I guess we'll reallocate our toothbrushing budget, allocate funds away from Bethany and a few more towards my toothbrushes. Well, we knew this was going to be a great conversation and that we were going to learn a lot, and you were going to be a great guest and be very educational. And that's certainly the case. We're so grateful for you for coming on today. What is one simple thing that you would like to leave the listener with this conversation today?
Just that, as we talked before, just as important as reading the ingredient labels on your products in your kitchen cupboard, I think reading the ingredient label on your oral care products and your cosmetic products are just as important. And kind of just becoming a little more educated. I think we talked a little bit last week about my 3 questions, or not last week, or when we did our last visit. Knowing the source, knowing who's producing it, and then what are they doing to it? Are they putting anything in? What are they taking out? I think those same 3 questions apply really universal outside of just food, but apply to oral care and skincare as well. So I just start, by just looking at labels and asking questions. And I think then all of us make more informed decisions, even if it means where I'm buying my next mountain bike.
That's perfect. That's a great way to explain that. Where can people go to find your work and these great products?
Yeah, so Redmond.life, just www.redmond.life is our main Redmond website for our consumer products. And then Earth Paste, as opposed to toothpaste, it's just earthpaste.com, also has some good information about the oral line.
That's awesome. We will make sure we link to all of that in the show notes, as our dogs are also very excited to.
We're all saying thank you for the great conversation.
Exactly. Daryl Bouchard, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for the conversation. This was really great, very educational. Again, we have zero affiliation. We get no commission if people buy your product or not. We get very excited when we find something that really benefits our life and we want to share it with other people. And we both feel that our teeth have never felt cleaner or stronger. And we're really grateful for you guys for making it and developing it. And we're grateful for your time today.
Bethany and Casey, thanks so much for having me. And I'm not sure what we'll talk about next time, but hopefully there's another time, because I sure enjoy our conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely will. Well, I don't think we can ever run out of stuff to talk to you about. You do a great job educating us. So thank you very much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.